This video is brought to you by Incogni. Last night, I dreamt of Rebecca again. It's funny, when something sinks, everything is so loud. There's this roaring chaos that grows like a tidal wave until it crashes and sweeps everything off into the sea. What it leaves behind is a sound even worse than chaos. Silence. The magnificence in which Rebecca the musical crashed over 10 years ago made the silence that followed especially eerie. News outlets that spewed off weekly articles of ancient streams, frustrated actors, and defrauded producers suddenly vanished into the Atlantic. The journey of bringing the English adaptation of Rebecca the musical to the stage left many to believe the show was snakebit. The curse of Rebecca. So much so that the likelihood of it ever seeing the light of day looked slim. But in this dream, something remarkable happened. Nestled in a tunnel underneath a London subway station, Rebecca rose to the surface at the Charing Cross Theatre. Now, we've been following Rebecca pretty closely on the channel for a while, so I knew you would never forgive me if I didn't fly to London to see this firsthand. Of course, with Rebecca, nothing's ever simple, and what started out as a trip to watch the first preview unexpectedly turned into 3 days of documenting the rehearsal process behind the scenes. This isn't a review. With how close I am to the production, there's no way it could be. This is a look inside a burned show's unorthodox attempt to rise from the ashes. This is an exploration of whether a show can escape the ghosts of its past. This is a look inside Rebecca in London. If you know the history of Rebecca the musical, then you know that mystery and the internet go hand in hand. As if it wasn't hard enough to stay anonymous online 10 years ago, it's practically impossible today, with thousands of data brokers grabbing your personal info and selling it to a slew of shady figures. One second, you're just trying to send an email from a FedEx Kinko's, and the next, you're getting mysterious phone calls from investors for a Broadway show. Now sure, you can try to track down these brokers and ask them to delete what they've got on you, but that could take years. Thankfully, there's a savior, and that's this video's sponsor, Incogni. Think of Incogni as your own Ron Russo, an automated private investigator that reaches out to these data brokers and tells them to either delete the files or get a couple broken knees. Okay, maybe not that extreme. Just create an account, grant Incogni permission to reach out to the data brokers on your behalf, and then sit back and relax as they handle objections and keep you updated every step of the way. The first 100 people to visit incogni.com/waitinthewings and use code waitinthewings will get 60% off Incogni. Link is in the description. At first glance, the humble Charing Cross Theatre doesn't look like the place you'd imagine seeing a spectacle-driven mega musical like Rebecca.
Yeah, this is the second railway arch that goes this way. The first one was the dressing room corridor and the ground floor we were on. And this is the theater as the cast sees it every night.
This is Stephen Levy, the managing director of the Charing Cross Theatre and the producer for this version of Rebecca. As one of the smallest theaters in the West End, the announcement that Charing Cross would house the show's English premiere raised eyebrows. Rebecca's always been staged in buildings that more closely resemble palaces than actual theaters. Not out of vanity, but out of necessity. The set is often menacingly large, with these huge towering pillars and giant staircases that wouldn't fit in a smaller venue. Compared to the vast sea of 1,200 seats at Vienna's Raymond Theatre, Charing Cross looked like a puddle. What's more, it's never been known for big budget spectacle. But to Stephen Levy, that's the point.
From a commercial standpoint, a smaller seating capacity is not obviously desirable, but from an artistic standpoint, sometimes shows benefit a great deal by the intimacy that the theatre affords that you don't get in a much larger theatre.
Stripping a bona fide mega musical down to its core components is a bold choice. But considering how spectacularly everything went down in flames last time, this may be the only way to do it.
It's not only in this room. It's in all the rooms in the house. I can almost hear it now. Do you think the dead come back and watch the living?
I don't believe it.
Sometimes. I wonder if she doesn't come back here to Manderley.
To call the journey of Rebecca the Musical's English translation hectic is putting it lightly. Writer Michael Kunze and his composing partner Sylvester Levay turned the story, based on the novel by Daphne du Maurier and the film by Alfred Hitchcock, into a high-drama opera called Rebecca das Musical in 2006. The original Austrian production blew away two American producers named Ben Sprecher and Louise Forlenza, who eventually got the rights to translate the musical into English. On paper, Rebecca the Musical had all the makings of a surefire hit. A translated script by Tony Award winner Christopher Hampton, a stellar cast led by a young Sierra Boggess, and a historic theater secured in London's West End. That's when the production got hit with its first little taste of the curse of Rebecca. In late 2010, producer Ben Sprecher sent out a press release saying that the West End premiere of Rebecca was canceled due to the discovery of an ancient stream under the theater. While the producers and press asserted this as a fact, others behind the scenes don't believe it. They think that Sprecher and Forlenza just couldn't raise the money and needed an excuse to cancel the run. Ancient stream or no, the two producers ultimately decided to skip the West End altogether and instead go directly to Broadway. Over the next 2 years, the cloud of the Rebecca curse seeped into the production in every way possible. Mysterious investors, unexpected deaths. At one point, the FBI even got involved. All of this, coupled with a constant lack of money, proved too much in the end. Producers canceled the Broadway run right before the start of rehearsals, and the English translation of the script vanished.
In retrospect, I think they would have to agree it was a mistake to try to bring it to Broadway first before the West End, given cost differentials, and most importantly, the fact that Rebecca as a title doesn't resonate with an American audience the way it does with a British audience, which is just part of the culture.
Levy doesn't just say this as an outsider. He worked alongside Sprecher and Forlenza during the early years in London. When the two started batting around the idea of taking the show to New York, Levy constantly told him it was a bad idea. Regardless, Sprecher and Forlenza ultimately did announce the Broadway move, and Levy backed out. Remarkably, years later, the shipwreck of the English adaptation washed back to his shore, albeit a little more bruised and battered than the first time Levy saw it. But can the show escape the looming shadow of its past?
It's just a huge privilege, but also it's incredibly scary creating such iconic characters, and because it's taken so long to be here, it's that kind of thing of, oh, we're the original cast of this English production. That's crazy that we've got to set the bar almost. So yeah, that's hitting me now. So I'm just gonna.
Yeah, don't say it out loud. I'm just gonna get stiff.
It's safe to say that Rebecca as a title is just as relevant now as it was 85 years ago. Part of what's helped in that longevity is the richness of its characters. The innocent and insecure nameless bride, known in the musical only as I. The brooding sad boy widow, Maxim de Winter. The gothic mommy housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers. There's a reason one of the first readings for Rebecca on Broadway included heavy-hitting stars like Hugh, I Was the Phantom for 6 years, Panero, and Cara Lee, the best part of Bad Cinderella, Carmelo.
All these characters are so well known. When I found out, I got I got the role, I spoke to so many people about it, and people came to me voluntarily to say, oh, I love Mrs. Danvers because of this, that, and that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you know, I'm in my 40s, and I feel like a role like this does not come along very often. I feel like I've been waiting my whole career for a role like this.
However, the richness of Rebecca's characters isn't the only reason for the show's lasting impact. The 2012 scandal in New York placed a global spotlight on the musical. The behind-the-scenes drama eventually overshadowed the show itself. Soon, you couldn't talk about one without the other. Unlike other, quote, new works, Rebecca at Charing Cross is faced with the huge burden of expectation. The expectation that the English translation will have been worth the wait. The expectation that it will live up to past productions. The expectation that it will correct the missteps of the past. A daunting prospect for sure, but also an exciting opportunity.
I remember seeing a poster for Rebecca and I was like, oh, I need to audition for this. And I remember hearing like the title song that you get to sing at the beginning of Act 2. And then I watched a documentary on it and then I auditioned for Rebecca. So that's the order of events.
What did you think after you watched the documentary?
I thought, this is so cool. Please, we need this to be a show. I really need to be part of this and it needs to happen. So I'm so glad that it is. So yeah.
There's a theme going on here. I also watched the documentary, and that was introduced through Lauren. So there was actually, in terms of knowing the history of the show and all the anticipation for the show, I don't think I realised just what degree and what kind of pedigree that this show had until I was already in it. Yeah, there was definitely an angst about it for a little bit for me.
You'll love Mandalay, and then there's the ba 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 ba. Because obviously, like when complete, we're here.
But that's where we go to the storm now.
Ah yes, ignore me then.
Fine.
Contrary to popular belief, the failure of the Broadway run isn't the biggest shadow looming over the Charing Cross Theatre. It's the success of every other production around the globe. From Korea to Helsinki, the show garnered a reputation for spectacle. Look at any Google image result, and it's clear that this show is big. Rebecca at Charing Cross is not. But again, to producer Stephen Levy, that's the point.
I think you identify more with the characters. There's perhaps less wow factor in terms of the set, because just architecturally you simply couldn't put that set in this theater, but you're physically very close to the cast, and you kind of go through the experience with them, really, in a way that just by definition you can't do in a much larger theater.
I think one thing this production's managed to do really well has been to actually utilise the audience space as well and use the auditorium to kind of make it more immersive for audiences, so to actually see the whites in their eyes and really share that story with them every night.
You can see every single audience member, and literally in the opening I'm looking at every single person. It's crazy having someone hopefully smiling back at you.
Anybody who goes into this staging expecting the towering wood columns or the flaming spiral staircase from Vienna might be disappointed. Some murmurings behind the scenes echoed these frustrations. But really, this run was never about the set or the spectacle. It was about testing if the material could stand on its own and garner an audience.
You know, if we know this theatre, and then you go on YouTube and you see the 4,000 seat theatre that's in Vienna and the size of that stage, it was never going to be the same. Not at this stage, not like the dream is that we will eventually transfer to a big West End theatre and be able to do something to that scale. But as the stepping stone to that, we all know about the Curse of Rebecca and the English version and everything it's gone through, and if this is the only way to get there via a stepping stone, via Charing Cross Theatre, then that's wonderful.
That being said, the material, written for a 34-piece orchestra, isn't any smaller than the set, and posed its own obstacles for the production. Enter Sylvester LeVay. The joyous and bombastic composer of the show reorchestrated the score down from 34 pieces to 18, just for the Charing Cross. More manageable, sure. But that's still a lot of bodies and a lot of instruments to find space for, especially when the problem of placing musicians already plagued Charing Cross Theatre's past productions. The solution for this problem started where many great ideas start in London. At the bar.
Originally, this was really surplus space in the back of the theatre. There was an interval bar here which wasn't used, given that we had very large bars in the front of house. And we realized after 12 years that the solution to this was looking us straight in the face, and it was to convert the area that had the interval bar into a music room. And so over a period of a couple of months, we built the room.
We all knew that we were going to be in a smaller space, so I don't think any of us could have imagined that there would be such a grand orchestra. I mean, it's worth noting that this orchestra is the second biggest in the entire West End, behind only Wicked. So even, you know, such shows like Les Mis and Phantom and all the things that you'd expect would have a massive orchestra are unfortunately don't have that same luxury. And
basically,
so
ours is better.
Oh god, no! You don't want to get blacklisted by Cameron McIntosh.
Please.
Knowing the history of Rebecca, it's always been weird seeing that big flaming R in the real world. It's one of those things you know exists, but you can't imagine actually seeing it in the wild. It's kind of like someone wearing a pro wrestling shirt at a Broadway musical. It's always been the stuff of urban legends, this untouchable dream. Whether it's in a 1,200 seat auditorium or a 265 seat theater under a subway station, I don't think that feeling will ever go away. But as I sat and looked at the R in Charing Cross, I realized something. The shadows of the past and the burden of comparison might be key themes in the story of Rebecca, but they aren't what it's truly about. At its core, Rebecca is a story about growing up. A symbolic fight to defeat the demons of the past and forge a new identity. There's no way I can compare this to Vienna because they're completely different. The Vienna production is a palace that's been standing for 17 years. The English version burnt to the ground 10 years ago and is only now starting to rebuild. A daunting prospect for sure, but the rebels cooled enough to start rebuilding that foundation. All on the long road back to Manderley. The thrills of the real-life mystery involving Rebecca can't be put into words. Click on this video to uncover the full story and buckle up for one of the wildest rides in theater history.